Sponsored by Squarespace.
The Scourge are one of the greatest threats we've ever faced. They wrecked half the world before, of course, we cornered Arthas in Icecrown. But no matter how many we slaughter, somehow they keep coming back. And in 1205, we're seeing some weird stuff with the Scourge, and it could actually mean something quite big, especially because we are heading to Northrend next. And Northrend, that canonically, is still very full of the Scourge. Now that might be confusing. If you go to Northrend right now, it's still in its Wrath of the Lich King state, so what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about these guys, specifically this guy, a Lich, Lazaar Baneshadow. But he's a bit weird. He's not your classic Plaguelands Lich, because he uses the Void to do necromancy. And if you're a lore nut, that'll really seem strange. Here's why. For a long time, we've been led to believe that the Scourge were immune to the Void. They built Icecrown out of Saronite, which is the literal blood of an old god. And then, in the Three Sisters comic, the Void fears death, almost as if death is the only true threat to beings of the Void, or really, whoever the hell those Void whispers in Illyria's head are. So, to see the Void so casually dominate the Scourge feels a little bit strange. Are they setting up a Xal'atath-led Scourge takeover in The Last Titan? That'd be weird. Or is this Blizzard reminding us of one of our oldest enemies before they explode back into the game? That is what we're going to be asking today, and to find out, we need to do a deep old dive into the surprising amount of Scourge lore that has dropped over the last few years. All signs point to Northrend, so let's get stuck in. Here's the thing I've noticed. A lot of people who need a website don't have one, or they have one that doesn't look great. And it's often not because people can't afford it. It's because they just get overwhelmed halfway through building it and quit. But today's sponsor, Squarespace, fixes the problem entirely. Their new blueprint system walks you through building your own template. It asks you what pages you need, suggests fonts that actually work together, and it gives you matching color palettes that fit your aesthetic. So you're not just starting from a blank canvas hoping for the best. You're guided by 20 years of design experience that have been baked into that tool. And it then scales with you. Do you need native video hosting? Not embeds, actual native video with a proper player. It's all there in Squarespace, designed to work seamlessly together. And it means that whenever customers hit your site, it looks professional. And when they buy something from you, Squarespace Payments handles it all cleanly. So, you can build your site for free at squarespace.com/bellulargaming. And then when you're ready to go live, use code BellularGaming and that'll get you 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. In midnight, whenever we return to Eversong, we see the land is totally healed of the Scourge. At least, almost totally. Let's just do a quick comparison. This is what the Dead Scar looked like in the Burning Crusade, and this is that same area now. As you can see, it is healed right down to Deatholme, which is the once fortress of Darkhan Drethir, who's quite a spicy boy. A bit of context. Arthas invaded Quel'Thalas all those years ago so he could use the energy of the Sunwell to resurrect Kel'Thuzad. Basically, Kel'Thuzad had the key codes to the Legion invasion, which made his return an essential thing. But the problem was, the High Elves had immense magical defenses to hold the Scourge back, and that is where Darkhan Drethir stepped in and pledged himself to Arthas, of course subsequently selling out his own people. A vast army of the dead couldn't crack the Sunwell without the help of one traitor to effectively open the door for them. Deatholme would go on to become Darkhan's fortress and a symbol of the Scourge's might in Eversong. Now, Darkhan was killed twice, and in quite Warcrafty fashion. Once in a comic, he was killed by a manifestation of the Sunwell's power, and then he was killed a second time, naturally, by us. Now, in Midnight, we return to find Deatholme destroyed right down to its foundations. That would seem like progress, but it was also a fresh wound waiting for the Twilight's blade to come and infect it. It all seemed to be going great for them. Xal'atath essentially won. She created her Darkwell, and that should have meant that the Twilight cult were winning, right? Well, if they thought they were winning, then they clearly didn't know their history, because every tool Xal'atath used has been discarded. Ansurek didn't last long. There's a Nanis giving up her body. Salhadar turned into a monstrosity. The list goes on, and the most recent entry is the Twilight's blade. And that means that with Xal'atath out of the picture, the big self-important personalities in the cult have fractured into factions. Some are still hopelessly loyal, others are losing themselves to the void, and yet another faction have decided that they are going to bring the Scourge back. But this time, with a hint of purple. The Twilight's Blade have split into many factions. One of them has now set up shop in Deatholme. Deatholme, once being the Fortress of Darkhan, recently the hideout of the traitor Blood Elf Lord Anatorian, who we deal with in the Delve and in the main campaign, and now, of course, it's the HQ for Lazaar Baneshadow. And we know all of this stuff because the Twilights are big into propaganda. That's how we first uncovered Anatorian's treachery. It was propaganda. And that really is normal. Every time a world-ending threat appears from Deathwing to N'Zoth, the printing presses of the Twilights just run on full time, ready for us players to find their inner secrets whilst we're questing. And with today's story, they're back at it again. But this time, they're demanding the Twilight's Blade rally behind Lazaar Baneshadow. So what's going on with it? Well, here are some quotes from the propaganda war. There's a sticky scroll that reads, "Banehollow will rise our fallen. Banehollow will lead us until she returns to usher in her final twilight." Compelling enough for those stupid enough to become Twilight cultists in the first place. There's also a crumpled page that says that Baneshadow has conquered death and void, which, if true, is actually quite huge, at least to our knowledge of the Warcraft magic system. And obviously, this is not just talk, because we find some worrying artifacts, like, as an example, a Scourge stone shard that was recently drained, or, for another example, a necromancer's decaying cape. So clearly, they're scavenging through the wreckage of Deatholme for power, and they're actually finding it. But of course, there's a bit of a contradiction. Because sure, this dude's name sounds like an old-school lich. The artifacts are pure Scourge. The propaganda talks about conquering death. And yet, the magic running through all this is void magic, and the cult is waiting for Xal'atath to return. So, is this actually a Scourge revival, or is this something else entirely? Well, that question matters way beyond Eversong, and of course, into the future of the game, and the expansions will play. If the void really can dominate Scourge corpses here, then Xal'atath would have a path to do the same if she gets to Northrend. And what you may not know is the Northrend Scourge problem is not history. It is not. No, we've learned the Scourge are actually resurgent on Northrend. They have been for a little while indeed. And to understand what's going on here, what we need to do is we need to understand how the hell undeath actually works in Warcraft. These are the Saronite mines. The Scourge, along with countless slaves, mined enough Saronite from these depths to build Icecrown and a world-ending army. Now, in Wrath of the Lich King, we discovered that the enslaved miners were being driven mad by whispers. They would literally go insane, and they'd run deeper into the caverns. And as it would turn out, the whispers were coming from the metal they were mining, Saronite. That was an early clue that Saronite was Yogg-Saron's solidified blood. Yogg-Saron, by the way, is an old god who once ruled over Northrend. And back in Warcraft 3, the Frozen Throne, this is where we got our first hint that the old gods existed at all. But Saronite didn't seem to affect the Scourge themselves. Neither the mindless Scourge zombies and ghouls, nor those left with their senses. They all seemed to be immune, to just not be impacted by Yogg-Saron or the Void Whispers. Now sure, some of them used shadow magic, but there was never a clearly established void sect of the Scourge. And better still, the game just didn't work like that back in the day. Sure, some Scourge characters use shadow, but Arthas was their boss. And here's where the mystery gets deeper. No one has ever flat out stated why the Scourge were resistant to the void. Now the easy answer is Arthas, his will, and then of course later, Bolvar's will. That the crown was keeping the door shut from the inside. Except that now the Helm of Domination is gone, and the Scourge are canonically running rampant throughout Northrend at the present. So whatever's keeping the void out is not the crown. And because of that, I think something much deeper is going on. And for that to make sense, we need to listen to Illyria and Sylvanas, though not their midnight appearance. This is the Three Sisters comic, and in it we saw Illyria, Sylvanas, and Verisa reunite. Now, by this point, Lyria was infected by the Void and was hearing what we presume were Lura's whispers. Now, if you're not aware, Lura is the Naru that Xal'atath recently pulled out of Illyria using the Black Blade, and it's the Naru that we end up fighting at the end of the game's current raid tier. Now, on the other hand, Sylvanas is undead, and the Void knows that she is signed up with Death, as in capital D, Death and its plan, by which I mean the Jailer. You see, in the comic, we see this. We see that the Void screams to Illyria this quote: "This one is dangerous. She is a threat and must be ended. She seeks the death of all things, all possibilities." The Whispers then tell her to murder Sylvanas a whole bunch of times. And the key line here is, death of all things, all possibilities. You see, the Void thrives on possibilities, as an energy, as a force, as a personality. You may have heard of a bit of a quote from the military side of things. Don't give your enemy a problem, give your enemy a dilemma. The point is, the dilemma is taxing. You don't know what to do. And it's that type of worry, anxiety, that's the sort of thing that the Void feeds on for its energy. It feeds off chaos and entropy. Death, however, is the total opposite of that energy, because it's the lack of possibility. It's the end. There is nothing beyond that energy but death. And to go deeper on that, in Koresh, we learnt that death is one of the lowest energy states in the setting, meaning that once you fall into it, it's difficult, should we say, to get out of it. Now, we know that because the brokers found a way out of the Shadowlands and back into reality. And with all of this talked about, we can now bring it all together. The Scourge have already given themselves to death, so with them, there is nothing for the Void to exploit. No possibilities, no energy. And that's because the thing the Void is trying to dominate within a being, with them, has already been sucked dry by undeath. Beyond the body, the door is closed, so to speak. And that is actually how the Void Scourge could fit into this story. So, let me try to circle the square for you, because, as it turns out, this is oddly well explained. You just have to look at a character and a conversation. It's Calia and her conversation with Margrave Sin'dane in Maldraxxus. When she asked if there's any difference between a light undeath and the Forsaken, basically the thing to remember with Calia is she gets killed and then she is seemingly resurrected by the light. It's the sort of thing that to a lot of the light-worshipping characters is this crazy, almost spiritual moment. But obviously it means she's a sort of different type of being, one that we very rarely see. Now, whenever Calia asked that question to Sin'dane told her that all necromancy is the art of animating unliving flesh. So, in Maldraxxus, and of course with the Scourge, they use death. Calia was risen with the light, and the Twilights are basically using the Void. So, these guys aren't the Scourge. They're just animating unliving flesh. But they could mean something huge for the future of the Scourge storytelling. So with that, let's finally work out where it leaves many people's favorite faction. During Arator's journey, we visit Light's Hope Chapel. It's a bastion of civilization in the otherwise totally wasted Eastern Plaguelands. But you would have thought that after all of these years, and since Arthas had been defeated quite a while ago, that they would finally have had the damn thing under control, especially with the Knights of the Silver Hand back in action. But no, with the Light's Vanguard teleporting most of their number to Quel'Thalas, Light's Hope is under siege again. There's no face to this Scourge attack, but they're clearly still powerful, they're still a threat. And what we've seen in Eversong is just a small fish. The real picture is what's been stacking up in the north. And here's the Northrend situation. A Darkfallen, who, by the way, are a group of basically undead blood elves, one of them, named Vorath, has rallied the Scourge and attacked Silvermoon during the Shadowlands. You may not have picked up on that, because you can't play the quest unless you are playing a blood elf, because it's their Heritage Armor questline. So we did deal with that, but Lorthmar was convinced the attack only happened because the Scourge was reorganizing in Northrend. Shortly after that, we got Muradin's report, in the form of exploring Azeroth Northrend. We learn a few things. That the Ebon Blade still holds the Shadow Vault, but that it's primed for an incoming Scourge counterattack. We learn the Fleshworks are still pumping out monstrosities, that Xal'atath is a Scourge wasteland, and that most of Icecrown is still in their hands. And if you're a lover of Classic, you know that wherever the Scourge are, it won't be too long until you see some Scarlets. We also learned that the Scarlets are building up their force at Onslaught Harbor. So there's a lot going on there. And I think this is not background detail for The Last Titan. I think Blizzard knows that when we go back to Northrend, we're probably going to want to kill some zombies. And I think this is their way of doing that, and of tying it all into the story they're currently telling. So, whatever's happening in Deatholme right now, it's relevant, but perhaps a bit of a misdirect, because this group of the Twilight's Blade aren't trying to bring the Scourge back. They are just Xal'atath's latest discarded tool, dressed up to look like the Scourge. But even still, we learn fundamental lore things from them. Fundamental lore things that will apply to the real story going on in the far north. Because there, the genuine article, the real Scourge, they never went away. And Midnight is walking us straight towards it. And you know what? Even though this is a lore video, when I think about the gameplay experience of, say, a new version of the Prey system, delves, whatever else they do for the open world, and then I think of goddamn Northrend, my favorite continent ever put into World of Warcraft. I smash all those things together with there actually being reasons for the Scourge to exist. Yeah, that's exciting. But I think there's someone we'll meet before that happens. Her name is Ashara. She was set up to return in battle for Azeroth, teased in Dragonflight, teased in the War Within, and literally right now in patch 1205 has been teased again. It can't be long, and to learn about it, watch this video next.